2, which is Introduction to Narrative Storytelling. And the second session is going to be developing your narrative. So we're going to start by defining what narrative means. And we're going to start doing that by talking about its history. Oh, okay. So the term itself comes from the Latin word narro, which means to tell. And in English, to narrate means to tell a story. According to many anthropologists, this ability is universal amongst all human beings. And what this means, I think Roland Barthes really explains in his quote. Under this almost infinite diversity of forms, narratives present in every age, in every place, in every society. And it begins with the very history of mankind. And there has never been people without narrative. So think of it this way. So you would go on your day and you'd go and tell your friend about what you've done all day. So that is a narrative itself. That is your narrative. You're telling the story of your day. And that's what it's really all about. And the three ways to define narratives are semiotic representations. That is, they're made of material signs, like written or spoken words, moving or still images, which convey or stand for meanings that need to be decoded or interpreted by the receiver. So how I said you'll tell about your day, and that is your point of view, but the receiving end might actually interpret it in their own way. So they might have their own point of view and they create their own narrative of the story. And they might even tell that story to another person, but that will then be changed into their own narrative. So the second meaning is narratives present a sequence of events. That is, they connect at least two events, actions, happenings, incidents in a common structure or organized whole. So every story has a beginning, middle, and end. So you go on to say about your day. So you would start about your morning, your lunch, and your evening. And that whole connection is that sequence of events. And then the third one is narratives are meaningful. That is, they have meaning for both senders and receivers, although these meanings do not need to be the same. As I said, the receiver might interpret it in their own way, and they might develop their own narrative of your own narrative, really. So what I've come up with is 3 ways for you to tell your story. And the 3 ways I think a good way to do so is with prose poetry or just the photo itself. As I am a writer, I've got the experience of writing alongside images and stuff like that. And I do believe writing a short story or even a poem alongside your photo can really develop that story, especially if like the photo doesn't have those details in that you might want to include. And with prose, you can write a short story that can be as short as 200 words, as 50 words, or even longer, depending on how long you want it to be and how much you want to share. And again, with prose, you can have prose fiction, or you can have like 100% true story, depending on what you've captured in the photo. So let's say you've captured the photo of a couple. You don't know who those people are. You don't really know. They might be arguing, but they might not actually be arguing. But you can create that story. You can be the one that decides what is happening in that photo. And with poetry, obviously not everyone is a poet. I don't think I'm a poet, but I do like poetry, and it's a fun thing to explore, especially because there's a type of poetry that goes with writing a poem alongside an image, and it's called ekphrastic poetry, which has come to be defined as poems written about works of art. And in ancient Greece, the term ekphrasis was applied to the skill of describing a thing with vivid detail. So this is, again, with poems, you can go into those details, but with poems, it's a bit more like a melody, like a song, something that flows with the image. So you don't go and say, oh, Sam did this and he ended up there. It's more like you create like a little flow of words that still tell that story of the photo. And again, this is something you can explore, and I'm really happy to help you with, because I do think poetry and prose is just a nice way to add to your photos, to the project altogether. But then again, if you don't want to do that, it's fine. You can just use the photo itself, and it can be one photo, or it can be a whole sequence of photos where you capture different moments of the story. And with that, you need to clearly show the story in those photos, because you want to evoke emotion in the viewer, and you want to show those details. So I thought it would be a great idea to go through famous photos with great stories that you probably might already be aware of, but you don't know the story behind them. But I think they're just great examples of photos that have been taken in history that really show a great story. So we're gonna start with Dorothy Lange's famous photo, Migrant Mother, which was taken in 1936. During the Great Depression. And in 1936, photographer Dorothy Lange shot this image of a destitute woman, 32-year-old Florence Owens, with an infant and 2 other of her 7 children at a PPKers camp in California. And Lange's photo became a defining image of the Great Depression because it clearly shows the struggle and the sadness in the eyes of the woman. And I think this tells a great story of how a lot of families have struggled throughout the Great Depression, don't know if they're going to survive another week, they don't know what's going to happen. And I think this really captures that story, that moment of the Great Depression, really. And the next one we have is Stanley Foreman's famous photo, Woman Falling from Fire Escape, which was taken in 1975. And Foreman was a well-known photographer when he attended the scene of the fire. And what began as him documenting the rescue of a young woman and child quickly took a turn when the fire escape collapsed. And the pair began to fall, and he continued shooting as they were falling because he didn't really realize what he's taking a photo of. And as he lowered his camera and realized that he's actually being witness of a woman plummeting to her death, he went to help her. And this famous photo won a Pulitzer Prize for what he's captured. But what it really does with the story and moment he's captured is the ethical questions it raises. Should photographers take these kind of photos? Should they be publishing this kind of content that a lot of people might find disturbing, even though it's a great photo, it captures a great moment? But then again, these photos are the ones that make a change in society, because this photo resulted in enforcing stricter fire escape safety codes. The third photo is Mark Ribot's famous photo, The Ultimate Confrontation, The Flower and the Bayonet, in 1967. And this shows almost 100,000 people marched on Washington, D.C. to peacefully demonstrate around the buildings of the Pentagon and protest against the war in Vietnam. And a photographer, Mark Ribot, documented the proceedings. And the last photo he took was of this 70-year-old girl who held up a flower to a row of bayonet-wielding National Guard soldiers. And she wasn't even aware of the photo being taken. But really, this image has come to represent bravery and the power of peaceful protest. And I think these kind of photos that tell these stories are quite important, especially with what's been happening last year and what is continuing to happen this year with so many protests going on, and a lot of them being a bit more rioty and not as peaceful. But then again, there's peaceful protests like these that we do need to show, and we need to show the people behind these photos. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at other examples, and we're going to start with an example of mine. And as I said, I've explored poetry during university, and I had an assignment which was to write a poem. Okay, which was to write a poem to go alongside a painting. And I know this is completely different because it's not a photo, but I thought it's a good example either way, because it could have been a photo or anything. But it's the painting The Kiss by Gustav Klimt. and I decided to write a poem which tells the narrative from my point of view, which is I see a couple that's happy, they're in love. I thought they might actually not be, but that's my narrative. And obviously with the painter, he might have not had that same narrative. He might have had a completely different idea of what he was painting. And this is where you can really explore with your own narrative. You can tell stories that aren't exactly what they're supposed to be. So I'm just going to read through my little poem here. I succumb to fall into your arms. You are all power and gold. I kneel to your desires, to your charms. My sight blurs within the flower farms. You are my god. Am I being too bold? Yet I fall into your arms. The kiss of a blossom leaves scars. I am your goddess, or so I was told. Still, I kneel to your desires, to your charms. Thanks to you, I can see the stars. With you by my side, the universe unfolds. Now I shall kneel to your charms. No longer will I feel behind bars. Always will I succumb to your fall in your arms. Forever will I kneel to your desires, to your charms. And I don't remember, well, this was a certain type of poem. And with a lot of poems, you can have a different rhythm. So you can have the first line repeats the third line, or the first line has to rhyme with the first line of the second paragraph. So you can really explore with these kind of things and just try and create that rhythm, that melody to go alongside the photo. And what I've decided to do is I asked you all to provide me with some photos that you think tell a powerful story. And this is going to be my activity of the day, which is probably not going to be your favorite thing, but I think it would be a great way for you to challenge your imagination and think of a story on the spot, probably, about the photos you've brought. So we're gonna start with thinking about the 3 questions that you need to always answer when you're thinking about a story, and those are what, when, and who. And you actually don't have to know these exact details. You don't have to know the names of the people, their age, or anything like that. You can just think of them. You can just imagine what their age might be. You can just come up with your own ideas to create your own narrative. And we're going to start with Tatum's, that's not here. Okay, so next, yes. So we're going to start with Dalginda's photos, and she provided 4 of them, which I'm really thankful for. And you can choose 1, you can choose 04, or whichever you like. Just choose and just tell us about like the story behind it, what you think it shows, and why did you take the photo and stuff like that.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood. So I provided 4 of my own photos and bought one of someone else's that I've just could link to talk about from the photographer Charles Dooley. I don't know what would be more helpful for this exercise, using my own photos or someone else's.
Well, you can use someone else's if you've got it now.
I can link to it. It's in the chat. So it's that first photo on the top of the image, top of the article.
This one.
Oh, I don't think it's changed because it's still showing my presentation.
Oh. Wait, I'll stop share. Share again. Can you see it now?
Yeah, and sorry, was it what, when, and?
Yeah, it's just like, what do you imagine this image tells the story of? So what, when, and how, and all those kind of questions that come with a story.
Well, I picked it because the series is about from the photographer Giles Dooley. He's a war photographer and is known for capturing pictures of conflict. But I picked it because it's a series of women, and I was really interested as Angolan refugees, how it's very confrontational and it's showing a source of strength. Like all the women, for this particular one, you can really tell, but for all of the women, they look very directly into the camera and are very much, despite what they've gone through, and are very tough and still feel but it's still quite vulnerable. I quite liked how they're kind of all sometimes wearing quite light clothing. And there's that real sense of contrast between what they're wearing. So you just focus on them as people, and it makes them feel a bit more exposed because you don't really see, there's not much of a background. It is just the focus is literally on their faces, on their expressions, whatever, however they've chose to pose.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you for sharing this with me. I'm sorry I put I put your photos on there. I just thought that that's what you meant.
Just quickly interject just for a few seconds, just to mention Giles Dooley, because I follow him on Facebook. Giles, can you hear me, everybody? Giles Dooley is an incredibly inspirational photographer. He was a fashion photographer, and he didn't feel that his life was very meaningful, so he became a war photographer. Unfortunately, when he was in Afghanistan, he stood on a mine, and it blew him up really badly. He survived, but he lost both of his legs and one of his arms. He now has carbon legs and a carbon arm. And now he goes back to war zones and he looks at the victims of war, especially children and amputees, the innocent victims of war. And he takes some incredible photographs. And it's just his personality, the things he's overcome are absolutely outstanding. So if you get a chance, check him out on Facebook, Giles Dooley. Thank you.
It's why I thought I wouldn't presume to go and show my photos of something that's really powerful comparison.
No, it's fine, because I thought you can always, the thing is, even with, especially with these kind of photos, you create an environment. So it doesn't always have to have people in them. You can just create the environment for the story. So you can add the people in the writing and imagine all those details that you haven't captured. But yeah, okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. And this is Caitlin's photo of her sister, but I just don't think Caitlin's with us. So we're not going to go through that then. Yeah, Grace sent me this photo literally last minute, but I was able to plug it in the presentation. So I'd love to hear more about the photo and what story it tells, if you want to share with us, Grace.
It's not on my screen right now, but I don't know. So it was from Friday, and me and my family went to the beach, and it's just like.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Antoaneta, we can't see the photograph on the screen. We're still seeing Giles Dooley's picture.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Grace.
No, sorry. I just have to do this again then. Right. Yeah, we're seeing it now. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
All right. I don't know. I just took it when we were at the beach on Friday, and basically because me and my family, like, both my parents are British, but I grew up in Canada, so we kind of were teaching my little sister about like how Inuksuks are kind of a part of Canadian culture, like native Canadian culture, because they kind of represent the way home. So my little sister was just making Inuksuks, and I just took a picture of her like in the background, like trying to find more pebbles. And I don't know, it's not the greatest, but I just thought it was kind of cute because like it just shows her like fully immersed in what she's doing, like using her imagination and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a great photo because you just told the story behind it. There's always a story behind each photo, and even if obviously you might think it's quite trivial in a way, but I don't think so, because you've captured the moment that might actually be quite important in the future for your sister and how she's influenced by the fact that you've grown up in Canada. So
I like the way that the stone is in focus and your sister is slightly not in focus, so it gives an emphasis to the stones, and you're kind of thinking, what's your sister doing in the background? Is she contributing to building, or is she doing something else? She could be lighting a fire, who knows? But it raises some questions about what her role is in relation to the stones, which I quite like.
I think it's an amazingly powerful photograph. It's got amazing tension because obviously those stones could fall at any moment, and that adds a real dynamism to the photograph. And then there's the balance and there's nature. I think it's fantastic. I'd be very interested to see it in black and white as well. It may work quite well in black and white. And what do other people think?
And you've got a cloud in the top third, slightly less cloud in the bottom third, and then the beach. So it works in terms of thirds, which is really, really nice. And the dark cloud, because it sits behind your sister, is quite imposing and it's quite threatening. And it's starting to say to me, there is some threat on the horizon. I mean, it might have just rained and passed on, but for me in the picture, it's a little bit scary because the cloud's coming in and you don't know what the cloud's going to do. Which beach was it, Grace?
I can't remember. I could check, but I don't know offhand.
East Coast, West Coast, South Coast?
Peacham.
Peacham, yeah, in Norfolk, yeah. Cool.
Okay. So we've got Zainab's photo, which she's not here as well. So what I've done
Zainab's on the way. So when she comes, Antoaneta, let's go back to that one.
Okay, I'll just go back. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I've done for the people that haven't brought photos, and you probably thought you're off the hook to talk, I want to do what a lot of my lectures did, is just bring you out there and talk even if you don't want to. So I've selected 5 photos that tell a story, and I just want to hear what you think the story is. So I'm just gonna go by just the list. So we're gonna start with Ed, and you can choose any photo and just how do you interpret it and what story do you think it tells?
So I think the central photo sort of like jumps out a bit more at me. It's sort of like quite active going on, like but it's unclear what they're protesting. They've not got any like banners or anything that you can clearly see, but they're obviously fairly passionate about it, to be lighting fires and causing like disruption, that they feel like that much attention needs to be raised to this matter. But obviously it's sort of at the same time it's a bit disorganized, so sort of like I said, I can't tell what's going on, so it's not the best of protests, maybe sort of maybe more fueled with sort of anger rather than the idea of change. So it could be the consequence of something rather than fighting for something in a way. I'm not sure.
Well, you're completely right. It does represent a riot from what I learned, and I didn't really get much more detail about it, but it does really show that it does come from a place of anger with people. Okay.
And Antoaneta, right, when I looked at it, I thought it's people in my village protesting because the bin men hadn't come and emptied their bins, so they decided to burn them.
Anger issues.
A favela that Chris lives in, a very dangerous place to go.
Revolutionary, Hunker.
Okay, so we're gonna go to Kai. If you want to choose one of these photos and tell what you think the story behind them is.
The one on the bottom right looks quite interesting because it sort of just looks quite like a derelict building, quite run down. And despite that, people just living their lives, just, you know, despite its constant state of just neglected living.
Where would you say that is set in?
Maybe Italy, somewhere quite like remote, in somewhere like Italy or Romania, one of those sort of, I don't know, the first 2 countries that came to my head.
So what do you think about the people that are just there? What do you think they're thinking? Obviously, sitting on a balcony that might just collapse any minute.
The woman doesn't look very, very impressed. Like, for instance, it just sort of, I don't know, they sort of just look like they're living life. You know, they're just like, okay, it might collapse. I guess I'll just have to live or die at any moment. But sort of that, just despite trouble and woe, just sort of getting on with life.
Okay. Anyone else want to say anything about the photo? Okay, so we're gonna move on to...
I think they're holding out a prospect of hope for tomorrow because they got their washing out and they're trying to dry it. So they're thinking we're going to wear some clothes tomorrow. So they're expecting to be around.
Yeah, there's this sense of tension in this photograph, isn't there? Because they're, like you mentioned, the balcony seems quite precarious, and there's that sense that it could collapse at any point. But they keep on living. I mean, I suppose if you're going to get very metaphorical, it's like all our lives, really. They're quite fragile, aren't they? And they could collapse at any moment. So, yeah, it's an interesting image.
Yeah, I just thought it brings me back to home, really, because I'm from Bulgaria, and Eastern Europe still has these buildings that are still being used by people, even though they shouldn't be. They should be demolished or renovated, but people are still living in them because they just don't have a choice. They don't have the financial capability to live somewhere else. So the only one left is we have Mohammed. If you want to choose a photo you want to talk about.
Bottom left looks like a eruption or like a natural disaster. And rather than the people running away, they're standing there in awe and taking photos as a wow, I got to witness this, rather than I wouldn't say that they're not fearful, but it's not their primary emotion.
Okay, any other thoughts?
There's also like the people just playing golf. So if it's like not a disaster, but like a natural spectacle, and these sort of people just not acknowledging it at all, and it does look pretty incredible, whatever it is that is happening. It's just sort of interesting, the difference between the reaction of the people that are there.
Yeah.
I want to mute Zainab. I mean, for me, it's
Sorry.
astonishing.
I was outside of the house and literally just came in and just joined it. Sorry.
It's an amazing photograph for me because it always, again, metaphorically for me, it almost feels like a metaphor on climate change. The world's on fire and yet people are still playing golf. It's like it's that kind of lack of concern with the natural world, as long as we can continue with our, everyday activities. So yes, it raises so many questions, doesn't it?
It just looks like, obviously, when I look at it, I just think of Asia, and probably things like these things just happen and people just continue on with their daily lives as if, oh yeah, oh well, that kind of attitude with it. So, hi Zainab, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You've missed basically what we've gone through and how we got to this point. But basically, we're talking about the stories that photos have. And you sent me this photo.
Yes.
And I was just thinking, is this photo that you've actually taken, or you've just...
Yeah. So it's from Ingleton Waterfall Trail. If you've ever seen it, it's in the Lake District.
Okay. So
it's like...
Sorry.
It's okay. So I was going to say, it's just like
we went on a hike kind of thing, like with my family, like after a really long time. So it's just like simple as I think like every single picture I've taken is always a memory in terms of like reflecting on mental health and, you know, well-being, and as well like taking the time out to go with the family, like because everyone's like always busy with work. So like when do you actually get time to go out with your family and like spend time with each other? So I feel like that was a really good one. Like we went after a really long time. So, and I love like nature. So I was like, I really enjoyed this. Like it was such a good picture as well. And the amount of waterfalls we saw is really nice.
No, I genuinely thought, I was like, I don't know if she's taken this photo or not, because it's really nice. So I was a bit like, oh, I do believe she's taken it, but I just couldn't tell because it was really good.
When I talk to my family, because they're not from England, when I talk to them, they're always like, you know, England sucks, like England's so boring. I'm like, what? Why do you hate England? They're like, the weather. And I was like, there's so much to do in England. Like, stop saying spots that people go to, and I miss the beauty of nature.
Yeah, anyone want to share any thoughts about Zainab's photo?
I really like it. I like the contrast between the greens and the browns. I think it really highlights the flow of the water in the centre of the photograph, which you've captured, Zainab. And then the white water plays off against the rocks quite nicely. There's a really nice link between the water and the rocks, which are this side of the photograph. I think that works really well. It's almost a stepping stone into the waterfall.
There was actually like a really like so many people, so it's so hard to like, you know, make sure that no one was there. Yeah. Like everyone was going in the water, and then there was dogs, everything. So it's like making sure like everyone was doing stepping stones as well. So just made sure like no one was there and took the picture like really, really quickly.
Technically, it works on lots of levels. You can see in this photograph, I mean, quite often photographing landscapes is quite tricky because you can end up taking a very flat image. But because you've got some foreground interest in the bottom third, and then you've got some midground interest and then some rear interest, the eye sort of has to move around the photograph, which gives it more depth. You've got the sort of static stillness of the rocks, and then you've got that kind of movement which you've frozen with the water. So it works on so many levels, from aesthetic levels, textures, the composition, the framing, the solid dry rock, and then the moist water, and the lush foliage as well. So it's a lovely photo.
Okay, so that's really my presentation, to be honest. I just wanted to obviously end with your guys' examples, and I wanted to just get you to explore narrative and think about next time of you taking a photo and that photo telling some sort of story and how you're gonna capture that moment or that story. I just want to raise these kind of questions with you guys, so just so you know in future. And yeah, so if anyone's got any questions that they think I haven't answered, please ask away.
I'll start and just throw something in, Antoaneta. I think it's a really good presentation. Thanks very much for that. But my opening statement is a little bit like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So what comes first, the photograph or the story? So when people are thinking about developing a narrative to showcase their heritage, are they going to start with a photograph, which then leads them into telling the story, or are they going to start creating a story and then taking photographs to enable that story to be brought to life? So what we've looked at today, and it's been really, really useful, are photographs and then the story that sits behind them. People will have the opportunity within this project to think about what they want to showcase in terms of heritage, and we've described how heritage might be a range of different issues. and they might then want to go out and take photographs that tell the story that they've created before they've taken the shots. So there's a question about what comes first, the photograph or the story. And I think that's something that participants will want to think about while they're maybe beginning to come to terms with the idea of their own projects.
Yeah, when you say it like that, obviously that is something that you can do, because I'll probably take it on like that. I would think about the story I want to tell and then create it with photographs, because if you want to, especially if you want to develop a character within a story, you'd want to know what that character is, and then you'd want to take the photo of that character, so you tell the story better, instead of maybe, how you'd say you'd have the photo of someone, but then what you thought your story wants to align with it doesn't actually align with it, because the character doesn't represent your heritage.
Yeah, definitely. But then if you flip it and you look at it from the perspective that Phil talked about last week, if you've rummaged through cardboard boxes in the loft over the last 7 days, which I've done, and found some pictures of family and friends from the past, some of which will stimulate an interest in me because I won't have seen them for quite some time, and there will be a lot of unanswered questions about some of the individuals in that photograph. And that might then lead me off to explore who they are, what they did, what relation they have to me. And that could be the start of a journey towards creating a project outcome.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just a different way of looking at it in terms of people thinking about how they're going to pull their projects together.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's lots of different ways, lots of different journeys that people can take. There may be the documentary route, where you are taking existing photographs that you're finding with your family and your friends, and you are looking at the stories behind them, maybe talking to elderly relatives about the photographs and who's in it and the meaning of them, where were they taken, and what happened to your family on their journeys or your individual journeys. Or it may be that you are going to do more of a narrative storytelling, where you talk about your journey and you take photographs which support that. So, I mean, hopefully people are starting to now go into their sort of family archives, and I hope you're looking at some of your family photographs and asking your parents and your grandparents and your families and asking them about where you came from. Hopefully you're starting to think about making some notes, writing them down, recording them. I mean, one thing, I think I mentioned it before, it sounds a little bit morbid, but you know, my mum and dad have died. I've got no way of going back and hearing their stories. I've got photographs and I don't know who the people are, you know, and the people that could tell me are all dead. So I think the project that we're doing here potentially can be an incredible time capsule that you can pass on to your future generations, to your children, and that might get passed on to their children, their children's children. Because obviously the world is going to change enormously in the future. And the work that you produce on this project could be it could actually be some of the best things that you ever produce in your life. It could be the most important thing that you produce in your life. The thing is, you don't realize what you've got until it's gone. So you need to do the work now in order to appreciate it in the future. It's like when I was a wedding photographer. I've done photographed a lot of weddings all over the world, all kinds of weddings. And when people have wedding photographs, people say, well, why do you bother doing it? You know, it's not, everyone's got mobile phones. But for me, the benefit of wedding photographs is not now. It's as you get older. You know, I mean, I used to be gorgeous, you know, and I'm getting a bit wrinkly and old now. And even, and as a photographer, believe it or not, I hadn't actually got that many pictures of myself when I was young and gorgeous. I mean, looking at all your faces now, you're all young and gorgeous. And I hope that you're taking lots of really good photographs of yourself, not just selfies on your phone, but proper photographs that you can enjoy in years to come and you can show to your grandkids. Yeah, I used to look like that, you know. So this is a fantastic time capsule for future generations. So yeah, dig in, and especially talk to those elderly members of your family who you know, might not be here in 10 or 20 years, and find out their stories, and write them down, take photographs, start recording it. And if you want to, embed that into this project.
Yeah, I think about like, oh, asking my granddad about a story, but then he'll just go on for ages and he'll just include details that I don't really care about. And it's just like, fuck it hell, is this going long now? Shouldn't ask the question.
Yeah. Well, you say that now, but I mean, when he's
I
dead,
know, that's the thing, because my mum would complain the same way, and that's why I tell her, I'm like, yeah, but mum, imagine who's going to tell you them stories about Bob down the road. He's not going to be there to tell you about him.
Also, and Antoaneta, just one thing about your presentation, you talked about photographs, poetry and prose, which I thought was really good. I thought the poetry, it's a nice poem, by the way. And I hadn't thought about using poetry to describe photographs for quite some time. So it was a good reminder. But one of my favorite authors is a guy called Bruce Chatwin, who sadly died some while ago. But he wrote a fantastic book called Songlines, which is a work which focuses on Aboriginal culture in Australia. And he focused particularly on the way that Aborigines passed on their heritage through song. So you've talked about poetry and prose and photographs, but there are other cultures who, because they didn't write many years ago, they didn't have cameras, they weren't writing poems, obviously, but they found a way to pass on their heritage, and they did it through song. And if anybody's interested, the Songlines by Bruce Chatwin is a fantastic read. And it talks about how Aborigines created the concept of storytelling through song. So that's potentially a fourth area that people could focus on. Not suggesting that you might want to sing your narratives, but you know, if you've got a good voice and you can play guitar, then why not? A lot of folk music is very much looking at heritage and writing songs and writing melodies to describe the history, the heritage, particular episodes in people's lives, particular episodes from history. So song is another way in which you know, you could think about describing your heritage if that's something that you're interested in.
That's a really interesting point. Teachers have a bad habit of trying to get their students often encouraging their students to do what they've done. So, I mean, I come from a kind of documentary, reportage photography background, which is why I've been making these suggestions. But, you know, you might choose a completely different approach. You might end up doing montages and tearing pictures up, or painting, singing, poetry. There's so many different ways of taking this. So yeah, please find your own way of doing it. One other thing, Chris just mentioned now, I really love the classical music of an English composer called Vaughan Williams, Ralph Vaughan Williams, who died in 1952, and I think that's some of the most beautiful music that's ever been composed. If you get a chance to listen to Vaughan Williams' Fifth Symphony, I cry my eyes out every time I listen to it. It's incredible. But he spent a lot of his time going into the English countryside and recording folk music, which was often rooted in narratives and telling stories. And he recorded it because he felt it was disappearing. It would no longer be there. So he recorded, you know, hundreds of hours, and he also translated it into musical scripture. What it's called now, you know, musical notes and things like that, so it could be saved. So it may be that you choose to focus on something that won't be here in 15 years or 20 years or 100 years time. You may see something in your neighborhood that is being chopped down or demolished, and you want to capture that side of heritage. So it may not even be about you, it may be about your community, your villages, the things you care about. You might be a skateboarder and someone's breaking up your skateboard park. I don't know. It's something that may not be here in 50 years time, and you feel an urge to capture it.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to call a close to that session, and like to thank Antoaneta for leading it. I think it's been really helpful, and hopefully it's given people something to think about particularly in terms of the way that they're going to describe the stories that they want to tell as part of this project. So thanks very much, Antoaneta, much appreciated.
I really tried.
Good. That's good. Beyond the call of duty, very, very good. Enjoyed it.
It's just before we go.
Also, yes.
Would it be? As you know, we've got an Instagram page. It'd be quite nice to take a screenshot of us all looking to camera, smiling if we want to, and screenshotting it so we could use it on the Instagram page. If you're happy to do that, or if you're unhappy to do that, maybe you'd like to turn your cameras off now. But it would be great to have people's faces, maybe smiling, looking like they're happy, you know, if you wanted to. So I go 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to take a photograph, okay? 3, 2, 1. Right, okay. And just put your hand up if you're happy for us to use that on the Instagram page. Great, thanks everybody.
Good, excellent, thanks Stuart. Okay, so we'll come back tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And Stuart's going to lead the session tomorrow, which will be the first time we'll get hands on cameras.
Yeah, I'm going to be driving down tomorrow morning and tomorrow and delivering to people. So yeah, hopefully everyone will have a camera by tomorrow.
Good man, good man. And all the cameras will be charged. They'll all have active batteries, so they should be usable, hopefully.
Well, can I ask another question? Toying with the idea, the next photography session, we actually go out and meet up with each other and go and do a little photo shoot. I've not got the dates in front of me, Chris. Is the next session next week?
Well, the next session next week, I'm going to change the date. I was going to make mention of that tomorrow and move the Monday session. So I've got to take my son to the dentist, unfortunately, to Tuesday. And then we've got the rest of the week where we could do one-to-ones. And then the following week, we've got lots of time to play with where we might be able to organise a rule of 6 photography session in town. So maybe we have a chat about that next week and pull some dates together.
I just wanted to ask very quickly if people would, if I said we were going to meet in Town Hall Square in Leicester to do a walkabout and take some photographs together. Hands up if you think that's possible for you and you'd be comfortable doing that at a future date.
Can I join?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, more oh, that's great. I'll put more information about it on WhatsApp when we've established a date, but it'd be great if we can actually meet up and take some photographs together.
Brilliant. Good. Thanks, Stuart. Okay, guys. Well, thanks very much for your attendance today. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I think we've all got busy schedules. And see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Netta. Bye.